All right, let's wrap it up with this. So let me throw this up on the screen here. This is in regards to Epstein. From Channel 4 News, Channel 4 has verified spy cam footage inside Jeffrey Epstein's living room, which appears to show the sex offender recording himself with potential victims. The grainy, low-quality footage taken inside his Palm Beach home was buried within the latest release of the Epstein files. Epstein's victims have repeatedly alleged that they were filmed as part of a pattern of exploitation and abuse. So we've known that his New York home was bugged. Because I think it was the New York Times, had a thing where they took pictures in every room. There were creepy things like some bride hanging on the wall or something.
The art is
super creepy.
Disturbing.
And he had pictures of like Bill Clinton in a dress and shit like that. But they had cameras in basically every room in the New York place. But, you know, I had speculated that all of his, if it's in New York, all of his fucking places are bugged. Like, who are we kidding? Of course. This is the first actual verification that we have that there were also cameras in his Palm Beach home. And this is not even the island. The island, I'm sure, is fucking bugged to the high heavens. You saw the dental chair with the masks on the wall. Like, I don't know what's I don't know what's going on there, but that shit is absolutely disgusting. So the takeaway from this is, just like we knew with New York, of course there's pictures, of course there's videos of people who were, you know, frequenting Epstein's business of child trafficking. You know, there's stuff with Prince Andrew, there's stuff with Donald Trump, there's stuff with Bill Clinton, there's stuff with Bill Gates, there's stuff with, Reid Hoffman, there's stuff with Leon Black, who we're going to get to in a minute, by the way. But that's what they're hiding in the Epstein files. Like, to this point, they've only released about 50% of it. They obviously illegally redacted a bunch of stuff. But they're hiding some of the most bombshell stuff that we know there's now pictures and videos of the most powerful people in the world. And so this is why Trump said, like, oh, you're going to hurt my friends if you do this. Like, it would take down any semblance of authority that any world government has if that stuff was actually released. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important as we evaluate what's in the files to understand that this is the definition of a limited hangout. Like, they were pressured into releasing this portion, and they tried to avoid it. They got backed into a corner where they knew it was this discharge petition and the bill was gonna pass through Congress, pass through the Senate, probably had a veto-proof majority. And Trump was like, all right, I guess I gotta sign this thing, but we're gonna control how it's released. And so I think people need to be very much on guard for, you know, potential information warfare that's planted in this. People need to be very mindful of the fact that we are getting the picture that they've decided they want us to have. And even this number, this, 3 million, there's 3 million documents. Like, where did we get this from? We're taking the government's word for that too. So even that number to me is suspect of what there really is and, you know, what actually may be available throughout the government.
No, that's absolutely right. And this is not even all of the files. Forgetting the files that we don't know if they have as related to this case or that they're hiding. This is not even the only case, not only the only set of files collected about Jeffrey Epstein, which are not being released as a result of this particular bill in the Epstein Transparency Act, if I'm not mistaken. And so we know that there are files out there presumably with evidence of co-conspirators or evidence of greater crimes that we're not even entitled to as a result of this release. Yeah. You know, I keep quoting Donald Rumsfeld because I can't get it out of my head. They're like, you know, there's known knowns, there's known unknowns, and then there's unknown unknowns. They told us as part of this whole release that they were not going to release things that were extremely violent or extremely sexual, although they did release a lot of nudity of victims. So, you know, they clearly didn't hide that stuff. So what are they hiding? And I think what's coming out in a lot of the, you know, Senate hearings, or I guess the congressional hearings with Pam Bondi and some of the questioning that they've been engaged in is what kind of investigation was even commenced with? Like, what did you do to theoretically absolve these people?
Right.
Because what we were hearing before was that because what we were hearing before is that there was no evidence. But there is evidence. There is clearly evidence that would at least lead you to want to look into it. But they can't seem to account for that. They can't seem to account for whether or not they looked into it, who they spoke to. Okay, we have this picture of Prince Andrew mounting over this underage victim, which you've identified as a victim. You're saying this is not a crime that you're pursuing. How did you come to that conclusion? What did you do to actually oh, I guess it looks like a crime. All these weird emails are super suggestive of things that might be crimes. But of course we looked into it and we totally myth busted it. They can't even explain that. They just get really defensive.
Yeah. How did you decide not to investigate these potential co-conspirators?
And stuff like loved the torture video, Stuff like, I'm so happy I didn't kill anybody last night.
Yeah.
You know? Why does he have a trap door at the bottom of Rape Island that goes directly into the water? And why did he buy sulfuric acid the day that they announced the investigation into him? Like this, the idea, it is so insulting to people's intelligence to pretend like there's literally nothing we can do and there's nobody we can investigate and nobody we can indict. And with that being said, let me throw this up on the screen for you guys because this is Leon Black, okay? Leon Black is this big time CEO. And I had done a segment where there was some other writing by one of the victims where she sort of cryptically implies that Leon Black bit her. And it was in the midst of like a longer thing, and that was only one part of it. But I remember thinking, geez, well, that's fucking weird, right? Well, now we get this as well. And Crystal, you were the one who actually flagged this for me, and you looked into it and verified that this is indeed real. This is a document right here. The to and from are both redacted. But it says, May 26, 2023, call with Gene Christensen, Wigdor LLP. And then it says, Leon Black, Wall Street person, 72 or 71 years old now, founded largest private equity global fund that exists today that's publicly traded. One of Epstein's friends, very powerful. Then it says, 7 to 8 years, Black was sexually violent with her. Black bites part of her vagina. Violence was arousing for him. Very painful for her. JC represented victim for civil defamation case, not sexual abuse case. Went to USAO in Manhattan, May or June 2021. JC doesn't represent her anymore. Got a call from the victim woman who said that she heard about lawsuit against Black. Victim said Black raped her around 20 years ago, 2000 or 2001, in Epstein's townhouse. Victim described it, felt pain, like insertion of something sharp in her vagina on massage table with head on floor and legs on shoulders. Excruciating. Spoke with blank at Manhattan DA's office, blank at DA's office. Substance abuse problems in the 1990s, preyed on by Epstein, gave massages to Epstein and Black for money, lives in blank now, abuse happened in New York. And then it goes on to say, minor victim at Epstein's townhouse and was told to give Leon Black a massage, violently raped by Black, 16 years old when raped by Black. And so now there's multiple allegations, not only specifically implicating Black, but specifically this biting fetish thing. There's stuff that's so depraved in here that as a grown-ass man of 38 years old, I didn't even know people were into some shit like that.
Can I give you one more detail?
Go right ahead.
Somehow makes it even more gruesome. So this was a filing in a lawsuit. Of course, Leon Black denies all the allegations, says it's frivolous lawsuit, blah, blah, blah. He's been sued 3 separate times of women who accused violent rape. In any case, this particular woman, then girl, she has Down syndrome. That leaves her developmentally about 12 years old. These specific allegations come from her.
So yeah, nothing to see here. No investigations, no indictments, no cases. And Pam Bondi's up there saying, let's talk about the Dow Jones. Why aren't we talking about the Dow Jones?
Not just no indictment, like they were saying up until this stuff came out, no evidence of wrongdoing, no evidence of wrongdoing. That now what's become no alleged wrongdoing, or like we have no credible allegations, but it just keeps changing. And the people involved either engage in this total denial that, in my opinion, doesn't really make any sense or sound convincing, or instead of addressing the allegations, they just do that thing where they say, I'm very embarrassed by my relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Like, I'm very embarrassed about that. They, okay, well, can you speak to the email? Because from my perspective, the email seemed to be real correspondences, although there's a real question of, are they going to try to plant anything that's not real in there? But it seems more like an operation to curate the information rather than to plant any false information in there, from at least what we've seen so far. If I received an email like that from Jeffrey Epstein that was just full of all these ramblings, full of things that I had never done or never said or anything like that, I would respond like, what the hell? What's going on, Jeffrey, my best friend? And so I think one thing that these emails have disabused people of that, was, I think, a little bit more plausible before they came out, was that you could have hung out with Epstein. You could have gone to the island. You could have spent time at his house. You could have been at his club in Palm Beach and just not noticed anything. Because there was this narrative that was floating around for a while that was meant to justify this, that like Epstein was just so smart and charismatic, and he was just so like good with money and numbers that like if you were there, if you knew him, you would know how people could be fooled into thinking that he was just a really good guy who was maybe a little like handsy with women. No, when you read the emails, it's clear he was like max pervert. He was like, it was impossible to not get the sense that he was like skeevy. Even Howard Lutnick said that before he was shown to have taken his kids to Epstein Island after he was already on the registry, right? And so I think it's just become so naked that it was impossible to spend, not maybe, you end up at the same party with somebody. He did traffic or like travel in very like moneyed circles. So it's possible to have ended up at a party with him, but I think it's impossible to have hung out with him without at least knowing something was up. And maybe you chose not to look into it. Maybe a lot of your friends have like weird pervert art in their apartment and their apartments are bugged because that's what rich people do. But it's not reasonable to say that they didn't notice anything.
I mean, it's a literal child trafficking ring. Epstein had at least a dozen passports of underage girls from the post-Soviet bloc countries,
Yeah.
You don't have those unless you're trafficking. We now know, and CoffeeZilla talks about this, we know some of the specific scouters and recruiters that he would send out and how much he would pay them for girls of like a different age. We have text messages of him talking about buying and selling girls like they're cars.
I mean, the moment when I realized that narrative of like, oh, he's just so charismatic and we didn't really know what was going on was complete bullshit is when I saw the birthday book. And it wasn't like one or two entries were a little bit edgy.
It was
everyone.
Except Bill Clinton's one,
Yeah, true.
Hey, Jeff, have a good birthday,
normal.
man.
Everyone is like, this was this guy's whole shit, right? And the creepy like child drawings and stuff. I was like, oh, they all knew what was going on. And one of the things that was just revealed about Trump, of course, Trump had claimed I had no idea what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Now, in one thing that was released is that the Palm Beach police chief said that Trump called them after they had already started investigating and, people had come forward and this was ongoing. It's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you got that creep. He was always doing this terrible stuff. I'm so glad that you're going after him now.
Oh, the most suspicious call you could make. It was everything about this is so suspicious. There's like, I think there's so much smoke that to believe that nothing was going on, to believe what they were trying to sell in July, that he was like a lone child trafficker who trafficked thousands of children to only himself, to himself, with no one involved except for the people who we already know were involved. Because that's a big part of this. Like they only will admit to exactly how much information that is currently available at the time. And everything else is like, well, it's just this. And so he was a lone trafficker, which didn't really make much sense. But if it did make sense, it would still question like how you could spend so much time with this guy without noticing. And even if that were the case, it would get back to your question, earlier about Senator Kennedy, demonic or just that stupid. But either way, it's like, certainly you should not have an outsized say in our society. You shouldn't be president if you were hanging out with this guy and you didn't sense something was up, right? Or, it condemns their entire community, which I think is a part of the story, which is that maybe you didn't notice anything because preying on the marginalized within your community is so popular and so prevalent that he kind of just blended in. Like maybe not for everybody, but for some people, like, there are a lot of rich men who like younger girls who just prey on them. Maybe not always illegally young, but who like that's just the world that they travel in. And maybe he was able to, by nature of that, be a predator hiding amongst predators. Because I do think there is an element of that story where a lot of the people who have been implicated in the Epstein files have other allegations against them. It's like when they say, it's impossible to imagine Trump did anything wrong. It's like, why is that impossible? He has other non-Epstein related allegations.
Yeah,
right. He has other non-Epstein related, not convictions, but decisions against him in court. A lot of these people do.
Yeah. And by the way, it is definitely a class thing. Like, it is a class thing.
Oh, yes.
It is when I say there's a shadow government of moneyed interests that run the world, and they are a cabal of pedophile, sadist, billionaire elites. I mean it. And now, before that may have been slightly conspiratorial to say before the Epstein files. Now it's like, they all knew. They know that some of them among each other are fucking cannibals.
And they
know that some are into torture.
And they provide each other insider information that they can trade on. And, if anyone thinks of stepping out of the circle, Jeffrey Epstein is like, hey, Bill Gates, you may not want to do business with me anymore. But remember that time you got an STD and I slipped your wife antibiotics? Just saying, that might be a little embarrassing for you if it comes out. It's mutually assured destruction. That is the currency that keeps this whole thing going. And why, like one of the things I used to hear all the time from Republican defenders of Trump before the Epstein files were released was, well, if this looks so bad for Trump, why didn't the Biden administration release it? Why didn't the Obama administration release it? Like, why didn't Democrats use this information before? And it's like, because this isn't a partisan thing, right? They didn't want the stuff to come out about them. It erodes the entire like secret forces of power around the world, and they're all invested in this particular status quo. It is mutually assured destruction. That's how this thing operates, and it's why it was allowed to operate and continues to operate, by the way, for so long.
And Bill Clinton still speaks at like the DNC every fucking year, and Kamala sent him to like Michigan
Larry
last
Summers
election.
was on the board of the Center for American Progress until this latest round, and then they're like, all right, maybe we gotta.
There are heinous allegations against him too, by the way.
Yeah.
And not just that, they're laughing at us. Because this is all going on behind the scenes, and people accuse them of it, and they're branded as like, if you point out that there is a, sort of a coalition of moneyed interests that work together, sometimes explicitly and implicitly to further their interest, people call you David Icke. They say, oh, no, like you believe in reptilians. Oh, you're no different than the people who think that it's like just Jewish people running the world. But, as people who understand that this interest is largely based on class, like we can see that this has always been, at least the shape of the way the world has worked. I just don't think people were prepared for it to be so literally true. Like,
exactly.
That's right.
The rich are preying on the weak. And it's like, we knew that was true. And so I think it's easier for like people who understood that was always true to believe this part, but it's still so like, I guess, stark. And I think they were laughing at us. Some of them are still probably laughing at us. Some of them are probably not laughing as much, like Howard Lutnick or Pam Bondi, but for years, for decades, they were laughing at like the people. They were laughing at the working class while preying on them financially and also just physically. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and comes back to dehumanization again, too.
And finally, to your point about the Pam Bondi crash out, let me throw this up on the screen because the DOJ saved the search history of members of Congress while they were looking through the unredacted Epstein files.
Unbelievable.
And so you can see here, they flipped it the other way because Pam Bondi accidentally showed this when she opened up her binder. But it says, Pramila Jayapal search history. New Brazilian just arrived, sexy and cute, 19 years old. Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty. Thank you for a fun night. It was so the same one twice here. And then it goes on. I found at least 3 very good young girl, but was so tired. I will cover up this week. Meet this one, not the beauty queen, but we both likes her a lot. Epstein victim list all redacted. I love the torture video sent from Sulayem to Epstein. Child exploitation and human trafficking task force PowerPoint on the Epstein trafficking. So they have all of the stuff that, like, Ro Khanna was in there, Thomas Massie was in there. They were going through the unredacted Epstein files. Ro Khanna famously outed 6 of the other co-conspirators on the floor of Congress. But, like, the reason they probably did this is because they want to come up with ways to spar back against, like, hey, what did this email mean? Well, that one wasn't as serious as you think because there's this interpretation of it or whatever. Why else would they spy on them when they're looking through the unredacted Epstein files? Clearly, they're trying to use that information to mount some sort of defense, right?
Well, they should try that then. They should actually try to do some of that instead of just like doing the yelling thing that Pam Bondi was doing. Pam Bondi's response to that that congressional hearing was so unhinged. I was prepared for it to be sort of like that because that's always how she responds to questioning, but it came across as even more unhinged than normal. And so I would have maybe preferred to hear some actual that torture video, that's just like something innocuous. Or when he's listing those ages that seem like little girls' ages, that's just the number of apples he's buying of different types. They have not said anything like that, really. There has not been really any plausible deniability. There's been a lot of denial, but it's been total. It's been saying, hey, all of these really suspicious emails are not actually suspicious. And that's more or less it. It's been a terrible cover up. But to me, it really goes to show they didn't ever expect that they were going to have to release this stuff and that they're not really prepared to account for it, which I think goes back to the question of was there ever even an investigation? Certainly I think we can say there was never an investigation with the intention of indicting people as co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe there was an investigation meant to sort of fully map the workings of his organization to understand what blackmail the CIA or FBI could use domestically or internationally. But it doesn't seem like they actually have a good accounting of, the things that you might expect them to have if they actually went through the process of, again, myth-busting these claims.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now.